Welcome to our latest interview exploring the intricate world of Chinese money laundering. In this video, we'll delve into its evolution, uncovering the mechanisms behind the underground banking system in China. We'll investigate the connections between organized crime and the Chinese Communist Party. We'll analyze the potential infiltration of American officials by Chinese organized crime. Welcome to the show.
Hi everyone. Today our guest in our show is John F. Tobon. He's a special agent in charge at Homeland Security Investigations. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I would like to add Mr. Tobon is also an adjunct professor at Florida International University's School of International and Public Affairs, where he lectures on global financial crimes. And from what I know, you also had a hit on your life from a Colombian drug cartel. Am I correct?
Yeah, a little bit. Couple.
Okay, good. Thank you for joining the show. I wanted to ask you first about the Chinese money laundering in the US and how did it evolve, let's say, over the last decade? When has it really taken off?
Well, Chinese underground banking, which is what all of this money laundering activity is really based on, is very old. It's ancient, really. It predates even what is known as Hawala. And in theory, it's really just the transfer of value, the movement of value in two different places. What we have seen over probably the last 10 years or so is a growth in the ability of these underground banking organizations to procure foreign exchange, dollars mostly, from criminal organizations, which are then sold to their customers. And their primary customers are individuals that are in China, high net worth individuals, individuals that are that have ties to criminal activity, to fraud, that type, and they want to get that value out of China and into the West. And one of the primary ways that it's manifested is in the increase in real estate ownership in places like the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and several others.
So we have here two kind of parts. One is laundering for the, let's say, local cartels on the American continent. And the other thing is that Chinese citizens, or let's say wealthy citizens, want to transfer their wealth abroad because of the restrictions they have in China, yes?
Yeah, and that's really what triggered that that partnership of convenience between Chinese underground banking organizations and the Mexican drug cartels, for instance, because when a lot of the individuals that were trying to get that money out of China, up until these currency restrictions were put in place in around 2012, 2013, they were able to utilize the formal financial system in China to transfer those funds out. Once that was no longer an option, they had to seek an alternative method of getting that value out. And then obviously that became the underground banking system. At that time, the underground banking system could not meet the demand of these new customers with the supply of dollars they had. And that is when they started to look for a new source of supply of US dollars. And at the other end of that rainbow, if you will, were the Mexican drug cartels, who had a lot of US dollars to sell. And that's when we started to see the collaboration between these two organizations.
So as it often is, not only did those restrictions actually, they did not even work in China, but they made it much worse for you, for let's say the situation in the US, right?
Historically, any policy that restricts access to foreign exchange in any country will create an underground system, black market, blue market, parallel market. And we've seen it really since the Second World War, since we've had the reorganization, since the dollar took over as the currency of business, right? Prior to the Second World War, business was conducted in British pounds and everything was centered out of the city of London. Once that those restrictions on foreign exchange were removed to facilitate international trade, that's when a lot of these systems really developed in these black markets.
Are the Chinese authorities aware that it doesn't work and they just don't want to admit a mistake?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for Chinese authorities. I can say that the underground banking system in China is well established, and this is nothing new. What is new is some of the customers, but the system itself, like I said, goes back many centuries, and it was not set up to launder money. It was really set up to repatriate funds from outside of China from Chinese expats. We know that the Chinese diaspora throughout the world has been growing, and these are individuals that are really just looking to send their earnings back to their families in China. That's the backbone of it. That's how this developed. The system was not necessarily developed with any evil intent. However, because it does facilitate the movement and the transfer of, it facilitates the transfer of value without the movement of funds. And that's something that criminal organizations throughout the world are very happy to take advantage of.
And is there a connection between the crime organizations and the authorities, the CCP? Is there a way to establish such connections?
There's anecdotal evidence and evidence that that you can find in terms of individual organizations where individuals that have ties to organized crime are also in high-level positions as part of the Belt and Road Initiative and some of those efforts, but nothing definitive. No smoking gun, if you will. I mean, I think a lot of this is really anecdotal evidence.
I'm also curious. Let's in the last year, is there a connection between the open southern border and the issue that we are discussing, and those Chinese that immigrate now, it's like 20,000 this year only. Is this somehow related to the money laundering? Are those people also involved in this procedure?
Well, just to clarify, there is no open border, right? Like we are enforcing the immigration laws. In terms of the individuals that are coming across, again, these systems are set up for the diaspora to send money back. So does it grow the system? Yes. But are these individuals specifically tied to a criminal organization and being sent with the intent of laundering money? That we have no evidence to suggest that. I think what does happen is, obviously, because there are more individuals that have a need to transfer funds or to transfer value overseas, then obviously that creates a bigger demand. And it creates a bigger supply, because now you have additional individuals here in the US that will be selling their dollars to those Chinese underground bankers, who will then sell that supply of dollars onto additional individuals who have a demand for it.
Yeah, I'm also curious. It often happens that such activities, they cause political corruption, let's say, in the area, the place where they are being facilitated. Does it somehow affect the US side? Like, do you also observe that those people are buying influence or buying people off locally in the US?
Not just in the US, but I think what's happening in Canada is a fantastic example, as well as Australia, and what we're seeing, the impact that it's having on the population, right? Here in Hawaii specifically, we have very limited real estate, and we have a lot of money coming in from overseas, and that is raising the price of real estate. So it's making it almost impossible for local citizens to be able to afford to buy a home in the state of Hawaii. And we have seen that real estate bubble grow throughout the US, Canada, Australia, the UK. One of the responses from the United States, from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, what it has been to institute a geographic targeting order, where the Treasury Department is looking at the transactions involving purchase of real estate that involve an LLC. In other words, that do not involve a natural person. So they involve a juridical person, and to see who is behind that juridical person and if and how they are tied to some sort of criminal activity.
Since you mentioned other countries, do you maybe know how is the situation in Europe? I mean, is Europe, I can imagine that probably the US is far ahead of what's going on in Europe, that you're probably much more efficient, because from what I can tell, Europeans are really behind in those terms. Do you know how is the situation here in the EU?
So in the EU, I do know that the threat is as big or bigger than it is here in the US. And the exact same mechanisms that are being employed here in the US are being employed in the EU. So again, it's mostly manifested in the purchase of high-end luxury real estate. And that really has been the primary luxury real estate and luxury goods, luxury vehicles, that type of stuff, whereas it's really meant to spend the benefit, or to be able to spend those funds that they were able to get out of China, and in some instances to really flaunt their wealth.
I have two more questions. One is, I'm curious, is there a division, maybe specialization of different nations doing different crimes? Like maybe do the Chinese maybe behave in a different way than maybe, Vietnamese or other nationalities? Is there a difference?
Not really. I think, what we focus on is not the individuals that are involved in the criminal activity. We focus on the vulnerabilities that they are exploiting. Because really, once a vulnerability is identified, it's there to be exploited by anybody that has the means to do it. So our focus is really on how this is happening, what vulnerabilities are being exploited, what can additional vigilance, what can additional education, what can additional laws or regulation help us to manage. But for us, it's not that it's not, we don't tie the nationality of the individual necessarily to a particular type of crime. It really, the vulnerabilities, the means, the methods, for all of those that have those capabilities.
Thank you. My last question is more regarding the future. Like now we are in the beginning of 2024, let's say this and next year. How do you see the developments? What do you think might happen, or where could all this go? What should we be looking for in 24, 25?
Well, again, I think we're doing a fairly decent job of identifying some of the vulnerabilities, and a lot of those solutions are going to take time. A lot of the solutions are going to take time because they have to get through legislation, through legislative bodies. A lot of them have to, will take time because we really have to get to the next level of international cooperation where, what happens in the US is not isolated to the US. It's also happening, with our neighbors and really our allies and our partners. And so this type of activity, the best practices that are developing in each country take a little bit of time. But I think we're starting to get to that point. A lot of this is really raising awareness of what really is happening so that people understand that what they're seeing is but the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other things that are going on underneath and in relation to that activity that is seen, that we cannot just underestimate the sophistication and the abilities of these organizations by focusing on only what we can see. And so through collaborative bodies, through international cooperation, working with, for instance, the Financial Action Task Force, those are the places where we're going to begin to bring these best practices to the table, share them, and implement them in different regions of the world so that we are moving forward at the same pace, with the same tools, and with the same knowledge.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you.
I have so many other explosive interviews on this and similar topics. Please check out my channel.